Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Shaun.
Now, you launched yesterday a very special initiative that was your brainchild. You've been thinking about this for a long time, and it's an initiative to help people's mental health through the use of physical activity.
Well, when I first became mayor, I always wanted to do something on mental health because of my own problems with mental illness, and I wanted to challenge attitudes publicly. So I brought together a working group. There's almost 20 people on the working group, and a girl called Caroline McBrearty and Darren Nash, who work for Donegal County Council, came up with the idea that we would call the event SAM. So it means Sport Aiding Mental Health. And it's a great logo that we have created. It's like a little man, looking very happy, and the logo sticks out. And I think that I want to congratulate Caroline and Darren on the actual emblem. I think that hopefully it'll be used nationally at some point. And
you're going to have a series of, you're going to have one question and answer session. I think Miriam O'Callaghan's coming up for that, isn't she?
Well, the conference itself is on the 31st of May, and I will open it officially, and the Minister, Kathleen Lynch, she will do the opening address. And then there will be, in the first session, myself, Charlie McHugh, who was my behavioural therapist when I had my own problems, and Dr. Tony Sharkey, who was my consultant psychiatrist at Letterkenny Hospital. We will go into a conversation with Miriam O'Callaghan. Now, Miriam O'Callaghan will be the presenter for the whole conference, and we will talk about the recovery process that I actually went through, and some of the questions will be clinical from Charlie and Dr. Sharkey, and they will give an insight how somebody like me began a recovery process. Then the next session's in, as you'll see all the guest speakers who are going to speak at the conference. The session after my session will be split into two, and they will do a 10-minute address each to the conference. And Miriam O'Callaghan, halfway through that, will open it up to a question and answer session with the audience, so that we can engage with people about mental health problems.
Now, you're well placed to talk about this, and you've been very honest and very candid, and you're going to be throughout this process in talking about your own mental health difficulties. For instance, I was reading some of your story before coming in today, and I hadn't realised just how much you had been impacted in terms of you had an eating disorder, you have been in a psychiatric hospital, I think twice.
That's correct.
Were you there, if you like, against your will at any time? Were you actually put there without wanting to be there at any time?
Well, I mean, it's well highlighted some of the problems that I had over the years, which is history now as far as I'm concerned. But in 1998, after 14 months of kind of going through a traumatised time in my life, I became very depressed and I started to binge drink. And I started binge drinking because I couldn't deal with the feelings that I actually had. I started having panic attacks, anxiety, developed irritable bowel syndrome.
How does that feel going through that? Explain, if you can, because it's hard to explain a feeling, but when you're going through that, what does it feel like?
Well, the experience of having a panic attack and you've never had it before, you feel like the first time I remember it, I actually felt that I was dying. And I couldn't understand these type of feelings that were happening to me. I thought there was something wrong with me. But subsequently from that, my family put me into they sectioned me into the psychiatric unit.
They sectioned you?
For my own safety.
Can you tell us about that day?
Well, it was kind of leading up for about a fortnight beforehand. I'd been binge drinking for 2 and 3 days at a time. Didn't know what was wrong with me, and when I took the drink, then it eased the pain, but I became aggressive along with it. So what do you call it? One thing led to another, and about a week before I was sectioned, I actually tried to take my own life. But saying that, it was more of a cry for help than it was for actually trying to take my own life.
Were you physically aggressive to people?
Well, I mean, it affected me very, very badly. what do you call it?
I know it's hard to talk about them things, but I mean, did you physically?
Well, I mean, I was a danger to myself more than I was to anybody else.
Okay, and your family noticed that, particularly your wife, and
well, I mean, I think when somebody suffers from a mental health problem, I mean, I had post-traumatic stress, severe post-traumatic stress, and then it developed into depression and all the other things that come with it. I think the fact is that when you develop that type of issue, that your family also suffers from it, and I couldn't at the time see that.
I think you actually come in drunk, and your wife said to you something about there's the tablets. Or
well, she said to me, if you're going to keep carrying on like this and not dealing with this issue that's going on around us at the time, which was well publicised in the media at the time, she told me you may as well take those tablets. So I threw the tablets into me like an idiot, and my children got hysterical, and my dad landed out to the house, and the ambulance came, and they pleaded with me to go into the ambulance, and I actually wakened up in the emergency department in Letterkenny, and I reared up with my wife, said to her, what am I doing in here? And I walked out of the hospital, and away again I went. And then a couple of days later, then my brother and my father then pleaded with me would I go into the hospital, and I wouldn't agree at the time. And Dr. Armstrong came into the house and pleaded with me would I go into the hospital, and at the end up they actually convinced me to go into the psychiatric unit. And I have to say this, I met some very good people in there. The staff were very good to me, and after a week I came round to myself. But then a few months later, then I'd been on tablets, and I'd been prescribed with a psychotic tablet called Melril, which is no longer on the market, and I was on this tablet for about 6 months, but it actually made me more depressed. So when I went back to see Dr. Sharkey, the consultant psychiatrist, and I was bleeding my heart out to Dr. Sharkey. Dr. Sharkey actually realised that my problem, tablets couldn't deal with the problem, and that's not saying that everybody can do what I did. So Dr. Sharkey referred me to a cognitive behavioural therapist called Charlie McHugh, and I have to say this, Charlie McHugh probably actually saved my life, and I had a fantastic GP at the time as well, and I still do, and Dr. John McFeely.
Cognitive behavioural therapy, of course, is, I suppose, to simplify it in a way, it's having the ability to look at a thing differently as well, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you're taught a process, how to deal with your feelings, how to deal with your behaviour, and that's the process that I undertook with Charlie. And I mean, my family had to kind of go through this process as well, because they had to watch me change my whole life. I mean, I first went into psychiatric ward. They thought I was an alcoholic because I was binge drinking. That wasn't the case. Went to a counsellor for that at the start. Discovered that I wasn't an alcoholic. And by default, I was very lucky that I got somebody like Dr. Tony Sharkey, who actually was listening to what I was actually telling him. And he realised that what I actually needed to do was deal with the problems that had been created in my life, and I didn't know how to deal with them. And then I began a process which lasted from the middle of 1998 right through to nearly 2008.
So you were using the drink to, in a way, dull the pain?
Well, I mean, I'll give you one example. Me and my wife went to see my mother and father-in-law in England, and I was one of these kind of people that if I missed a flight, I'll get a flight the next day. We were driving back to Stansted Airport in a hired car. I missed the turn-off point, and I'll tell you this to this day, I'll never forget it. My wife will tell you, I actually thought I was going to die. I took that big a panic attack just for missing the turn-off, and that's the type of way this affected me. Those type of feelings, like everybody who knew me, I was so fit, I was so healthy at the time before the stuff that happened in my life that is now history. I couldn't actually deal with the trauma of what actually happened to me at the time.
Is it true that as part of your treatment you were advised to go and stand around members of An Garda Síochána?
Well, it's comical now when you look at it, but it wasn't comical at the time. And Charlie McHugh, part of the therapy was to confront your fears. And one of my biggest fear was anybody in a blue uniform. It didn't have to be a guard. Could have been somebody who worked in a post office or anybody wearing blue. I just completely freaked. And I mean, I would would have had severe anxiety when I would have seen a blue uniform. So one of the exercises that I had to do, the blue flu was on at the time, and Charlie McHugh recommended for me to go to one of the marches of the blue flu and march along with members of the Garda Síochána, and I told him, I says, no way am I doing that, Charlie. But at the time, our district court cases were on, and they were getting a lot of publicity at the time. So what I started to do was, in the courthouse, I started sitting beside members of the guards who had their uniform on, and slowly but surely I started teaching myself how to be able to control my feelings around a blue uniform.
How hard was that?
That was extremely painful. I can't even describe it.
Would you sweat it and palpitations?
I would never have been a person who would have sweated, but when I'm annoyed, I would go white, and I would kind of get a bit like a shake in my arms and my hands and that. But I just had to learn myself to be able to overcome that problem, and I have successfully done that.
I mean, I have to say, you appear a much calmer person than you did for a while. Even, hearing you, even when we talk. So clearly, whatever's happening through the treatment is changing you.
Well, I mean, I no longer go to a behavioural therapist, but I mean, Charlie's always there if I ever need him. I would have started off on a weekly basis, and ended up on a fortnightly basis, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and then coming to the end of my treatment with Charlie, it would have been maybe once every 3 months, and then twice a year, and then went to maybe once a year. And there was one actual period in my life where I was going through a terrible time at the tribunal when I was representing myself. I kind of took another relapse because I was under so much pressure at the time. And I started kind of going back to Charlie and just going over what we had learned over the previous years before it, just to renew your memory on it. But I get up every morning, and that's the first thing I say to myself: I'm alive. I know what to do if I feel wrong, and I just have to get up and get on with it. You abused alcohol for a while, but you're not an alcoholic, you say. You were told that, but you then started to abuse food. Was that after the alcohol? Well, in the year 2000, I began a training process, and I'd always been very fit, and I'd put on an awful lot of weight. I went up to about 18 or 19 stone at the time, and I went through this training program because I was well known in the boxing circles and the football circles when I was younger, and I lost a lot of weight, and I went down to about 12.5 stone again, and I took a relapse. But when I took the relapse, I started binge eating. So what I would have done, I would have come in at night time, and I would just raided the fridge. I would have got a loaf of bread, and I would have got ham, and I would have got the packets of crisps that the wife would have got for the kids for school, and the bars, and I would just laid into that and started eating until I would actually feel sick. And what transpired from that, then I went up to 24.5 stone, and Dr. Sharkey became concerned about me at the time, and he says, Frank, you're going to have to do something about your weight. And I started telling him about the binge eating because I was actually embarrassed about it. And I think one of the things that I was more embarrassed about than anything was actually the weight gain that I had gained, because I'd always been in and around 11, 12 stone in my prime. And the fact that I put on all this weight then, and I didn't feel comfortable in myself, and trousers were tight, and the shirts, couldn't get a shirt to fit me. It was embarrassing at the time, but I now understand why I was embarrassed. So I've dealt with the eating disorder the same way I dealt with all the other problems through Charlie. And I've moved on from that. Sometimes it's very hard, especially at night time, but you just have to tell yourself, look, be sensible, don't be raiding the fridge. And I still, an odd time, would go on at night time and raid the fridge and eat things that I shouldn't eat. Subsequently out of that, I'm very healthy, but I developed diabetes out of it. So I would put that down to the eating disorder. And how do you handle now situations? So if you're getting annoyed, somebody annoys you, something is said to you that really upsets you, how do you prevent yourself from flying off the handle now? What techniques have you learned? Well, I mean, I'm still no angel in that aspect, and I would be the first one to admit it. Sometimes I react when I shouldn't react, but Charlie learned me a long time ago when I first started to go to him that people only have power over you if you give them power over you. And I think that that's one of the things that I have to tell myself every day, not to react. I mean, I'm well known for sometimes reacting when I shouldn't react, and I'm the first to hold my hands up that I do that.
So would you?
But I have to work at that every day.
Would you, like, for instance, listen to yourself, or think back to a situation? Obviously, you've been more prominently known in politics in the last number of years. And would you think afterwards, why did I do that?
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. But this is all the process of learning how to be able to deal with different situations in your life. What way would you describe? People only have power over you if you give them power over you. I mean, it's simple.
Do you think that going into politics was a good thing for you? I mean, now you're the mayor and, you know, you're obviously enjoying this role, but do you think you went into politics at a good time or a bad time in terms of where you were at?
Well, I never really thought about politics, Shaun. It just happened by accident. I actually had been a member of the Labour Party for about a year beforehand, and Michael O'Boyle, who's my director of elections, approached me 4 weeks before the local elections, and I said to my father, "What do you think?" He says, "You might as well have a go to see what it's like." But I would say at the very start, the first couple of years in politics, I was very naive. I thought I could probably change the world. There's different ways and different means, and there's different ways of doing it, making changes. But I think that when I first got elected, like, I thought I was fighting the garage. Do you know what I mean? And I think I've grown up more in politics over the last number of years, and I think the role as mayor has helped me to do that. Because everyone who's elected in the council are elected on their own merit, and they all do their best for people who come to them. I think maybe when I first got elected, I kind of have an attitude that nobody else can do things the way I can do it, you know, that type of way. But I think that I would say I'm more experienced. I think the two by-election and the general election learned me a lot of lessons about politics. But really, this conference, I don't want it to be political. I want it to be a platform for people to be able to say that we are now beginning a national conversation about mental health. And I have to say this, the people in the working group, and I would like to mention them, Caroline McCleary, Charlie McHugh, Councillor Cora Harvey, Miles Sweeney, Kevin Mills, Anne Sheridan, Anne McAteer, John Meehan, Bill Vaughan, Therese Lafferty, Hugh Friel, Joe Monaghan, John Campbell, Charles Sweeney, Christina O'Donnell, Kate Coughlin, Darren Nash and Jared Finnegan.
I can tell you that the texts coming in so far are saying things like, it's one of the most honest interviews I've ever heard, and good on Frank. And another text who says, my hat off to you, Frank. Good on you for talking about it, and congratulations. And very interesting listening to Frank. Nobody understands what it's like unless they go through it. Panic attacks are so scary. So perhaps people are getting a chance to hear a different side of the story today from you, because you obviously have to think about this type of thing before you do it, because you're really letting us into your private life. And we know we've been in your life through the tribunals and everything else, but there's a different side of you we're hearing today, and it's some people don't want to talk about it if they see it as a sign of weakness.
Well, I mean, I don't see it like that. I have to say, I'm only the front for this conference. All the people that I named there, without them, I wouldn't have been able to have done this, put this conference together. But
without your experience, you probably wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, I want to give credit to the people who are helping me. But I've got funding from Donegal County Council. I have funding from the HSE, and yesterday Minister Riley signed off on the National Lottery funding for the conference. So I've had help there as well. So I mean, without the money, we wouldn't be able to do the conference. And I think that the facts are that, in my opinion, we don't do enough in Irish society to promote positive mental health. And Miles Sweeney from the Donegal Sports Partnership has been working on a sports charter, which we hope to launch at the very end of the conference. a sports charter which will promote positive mental health. And I think that the fact that Jim McGuinness is the ambassador for the event and one of the keynote speakers, I mean, his story in itself, he went back to education. And I mean, I've listened to some inspirational talks that he has given. The type of calibre of speakers like Tony Bates from Jigsaw. I mean, these people in their own right have such a vast knowledge of the problems with mental health.
Your wife, Patricia, you've got, how many children have you got?
I have 4 children.
4.
A son and 3 daughters.
For her, she mustn't deserve a medal at this stage. I mean, you described a situation there, and it sounds like you weren't very nice to be around at that time. It couldn't have been easy for her and the children.
Well, I mean, epidemic recovery really to my family. The word love, I think sometimes is not used enough. And I think the love from my own family, my mum and dad too, and my mother and father-in-law. My mother-in-law is no longer with us. I think that the inner circle of your family plays a very important role. And I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for my immediate family. I mean, without my wife, I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to function. I mean, for the years Mayor, she's been my PA. And I think that what people don't realise that the family unit is very, very important. And I have to say that I have a very strong family unit. And
what did the children used to say to you, Frank?
Well, I mean, all I can say is that the school teachers that teach my children will tell you that we've kind of counselled our own children. Because when we first went through the traumatising time, I was advised at the time the best counselling that you can give your family is to give it yourself. That's what Charlie McHugh told me, because we were considering taking 2 of our children to child psychologists because of something that actually happened when I was arrested, and we decided against that on the advice of the psychiatrist and Charlie McHugh. And I have to say that, I mean, I'm so proud of my family. My son doesn't drink. My daughter, she loves her job, and my 2 youngest kids are doing their leaving cert, and they're up there in the top students in the school. And I think that that's a testament to my wife, because my wife is kind of it's usually the man is the man of the house, but my wife is the man of our house, and I'm not ashamed to say that.
In what way?
Well, I mean, she's the stone that everybody leans on. I think that at times that I feel depressed, I mean, my wife's my best friend, so I can talk to her about anything.
And when were you last depressed?
Well, no, you see, when you suffer from mental health, Shaun, it's an everyday battle. I mean, touch wood, I have never taken a tablet since the day that I went to Charlie McHugh, because I've done it all through behavioural therapy. And it just continue. It's like learning a book. You keep reading it to learn it. And I mean, I just keep repeating in my head what I've learned from Charlie over the years, and that helps me every day. But I do believe that everybody has a higher power as well, and I think the higher power that has protected me is very powerful.
You're not, I think you said you're not sort of one of these people that runs to mass all the time or that, but not that there's anything wrong with that for people who want to, but you do have a particular devotion in your life. What is it?
Well, I think in 2000 I went to Medjugorje, and I had an experience on the mountain. I went up the mountain every morning with a man at 5 o'clock, and I can't explain it to this day, but I don't go to mass enough. I probably should go to mass more often.
What happened on the mountain?
It just, something came over me, and actually after that our case kind of turned around, and I think everyone has a higher power that looks after them.
You don't drink now?
No, I take an occasional drink.
Right.
No, I wouldn't be a person who would go into a pub and, like, if I go to a family wedding or something like that, but like the functions and that as mayor, I wouldn't take a drink. You know, I would watch myself, and like I wouldn't. I've never actually been a big drinker. But at the time, that was another avenue for me to try and release myself from the feelings that I was having.
Where do you see yourself? I mean, going, obviously living day to day with your issues and that, and they're not just going to stop because you are who you are. But do you want to carry on in politics?
I don't know, Shaun. A long time ago, Charlie McHugh told me you only can cross bridges when you come to them, and you only can cross one at a time. And I've always taken that with me. I was kind of a person who would try to do everything in the one go. I think that, and even sometimes I still try to do that. But I think that if you say that to yourself every day, you only can cross bridges when you come to them. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in a week's time. I don't know whether I'll be alive. We never know. Like, I mean, you only have to look at tragedies within families that happen all the time. But I mean, I can't say. But at the minute, I'm enjoying what I do. I enjoy helping people, and especially the launch of this conference. I mean, I'm really excited about the fact that I can share part of my story, and that the guest speakers can relate to the problems that people have with mental health.
Well, as I say, I mean, the people who are contacting us are really happy that you've spoken the way you have today. It's a fantastic, honest interview from the Mayor. Thank you. And another caller who says, well done, Frank, for talking about your problems. I'm on your side on this one because I suffer mental health problems myself, and it was hard to talk about it. And that's from one of our callers, I think. That's actually one guy who may have been at one of the protests that you recently spoke to. I'm not sure whether the name is given there. You are single-handedly getting rid of the taboo around mental health, and I'm in awe of your openness, says another texter. So it's certainly been a revelation for some people.
Well, I mean, when I brought the working group together, there's some very experienced people on it who have named there. And the question that was asked of me by the working group, and I made it clear that it wasn't me making the decisions, that it would be the working group who would make the ultimate decisions about the conference. No, it would be like a majority vote on it. So I was asked, what did I want to achieve out of this conference? And what I want to achieve out of this conference at the very end, that everyone in the country, and in Donegal especially, knows that there's always someone you can talk to. Their mother or father, brother and sister, cousins, friends, community group worker, that there is somebody out there. I mean, we're also going to invite community groups and different organisations to have stalls on the day to give out information on what they do for mental health. I think that my position as mayor allows me to be able to promote, especially with our youth. I mean, I'll be inviting the Donegal Youth Council to attend the conference. They were also there yesterday at the launch. I think that everyone in society, whether you're famous or you're not famous, have at some stage had a member of their family who have suffered from a mental illness. And you see, mental illness is different to other illness, because I might suffer mental illness differently to the Joe Bloggs. And Joe Bloggs might suffer mental illness different to me, and that's the difficult thing about mental health. I mean, the word stigma, I would like to see it made extinct in mental health. I would like the word misunderstanding of the illness, and I think that we have to create an awareness of what mental health is all about.
I'm so delighted to hear Frank speak about panic attacks. After having a hysterectomy a number of years ago, I began to have them, and they more or less took over my life. I'm humbled by his interview, and I admire him for speaking out so honestly, and good on him. And you are a gentleman. You helped me when my back was to the wall, and this is a good story, says a texter. And a caller says, not everybody can get that much help when depressed. What would you say to that?
No, well, you see, people look at me, and I come from a family background of business. I never paid for any help. I mean, the help is there, and that's what I want people to know, that the HSE sometimes come in for criticism. Sometimes it's deserved, sometimes it's not deserved. But my experience of the HSE, that if you want to avail from the help's there if you go looking for it. And I mean, I was very lucky that I had Dr. Sharkey, and I was very lucky that I got Charlie McHugh. But I mean, in my experience, the help is there if you want it.
Okay.
And the other thing as well, Shaun, when you go to somebody like a behavioural therapist, it only works if you listen to the person who's advising you. I mean, I used to keep a diary on a daily basis on the advice of Charlie, write down how I felt, write down some of the experiences that I had on the day, and I mean that actually helped me to be able to deal with some of the problems that I was having on an ongoing basis.
Sounds like you were lucky to come into contact with Charlie there as well, isn't it? Because he's been, as you say, a lifesaver. Well said, Frank. Positive interview and a great moral booster for other people out there. By the way, there is a sponsored walk from St Mary's Church, Stranola, Good Friday at 5 o'clock in aid of Aware, helping people with depression. And there are a lot of great organisations out there.
That's one of the great organisations there.
It is.
And there's another one called Living Links too, that do a hell of a lot of work.
And Grow. Different, yeah.
There's so many of them.
So many, yeah. Well done, Frank, on your interview. You're a good person to share it with us, and we're very proud of you. And I'm sitting here listening to Frank, and I think he's telling my story. I suffer from anxiety and depression. I think you've put it into context today for a lot of people. I think there'll be a lot of people listening today relating to your story and saying, that's what I went through. Now, yours was a particular set of circumstances that not everybody will go through, and yet the reaction, your bodily, psychological reaction, is the same.
Well, I mean, if people come along to the conference, and we're hoping we're going to get as many people in as possible, they will hear the insight from Charlie McHugh. He'll explain in detail the problems that people do have with the physical aspect of feeling not right. That's explain it in ordinary layman terms, but Charlie was explaining it in the clinical terms.
Okay, I can.
Some of Charlie's speeches are just fantastic.
I can so relate to what you're saying. I too have had a life of misery because of others. With the help of a good counsellor, I learned to cut them out of my life. In the end, I had to leave an abusive husband to be able to move on. It was a very difficult job, and at times I wondered if I did the right thing by leaving. Today is a good, positive I'm in a good, positive mental health state, and I'm glad I did. Sometimes I think your suffering teaches you to be stronger, and in the end, the suffering can be the best lesson you learn from. But today I find myself hiding from others that I was in a mental health hospital with. Yet, if I was in St Luke's, I'd have no problem saying that's where I was. So in other words, I think she says that she feels she can't admit that she was in a psychiatric hospital. You've admitted today you were there not once, I think twice.
Well, the second time, I realised myself that I needed more help, and I mean, I signed myself into the psychiatric ward. And what do you call it? I always remember what a nurse told me. He says the people outside that gate will do a lot more harm to you than the people inside the gate. And I have to say that, what do you call it? The people who I met, patients, and the people who work on the psychiatric ward are some of the most fantastic people that I've ever met in my life. A
caller's making the point that I think I tried to allude to earlier to you. Why have you chosen such a stressful occupation? I mean, I would have thought, if I was advising you, given the state that you have been in and the stress in your life and what you have been through, the last place I'd be going to is politics, where it can be so personal if you want to take it personally, and you get so much abuse at times, and some of it deservedly because of policies that are hurting people. Might be the last place you'd want to be. I mean, as your counsellor ever said to you, get out of it.
No, but see, I haven't been with Charlie McHugh since 2008, but I mean, it's ironic. I went on a golfing holiday last year, and Charlie actually was on the golfing holiday with me. And I mean, that speaks for itself. Like, I mean, I don't need Charlie McHugh anymore, but I mean, what Charlie has learned me has enabled me to be able to deal with different issues and different problems. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I deal with problems that come to me on a daily basis. Some of them are not political problems, some of them are people who have in dire straits, who don't feel well. And I mean, I feel that at one stage in my life, nobody listened to me, and I would like to think that I would always give somebody an ear to listen to their problems.
Okay, I'm going to stare at politics. I could say a lot of things that, involve politics, and people would say that a lot of stresses people are going through at the moment are as a result of government policy. I'll say that because it's a blanket comment from people as well.
The day that I don't enjoy doing something is the day that I'll walk away from it. Now, there is days that I don't like politics, but I mean, in general, I like to help people, and I like to get results for people.
Well, as I say, there's a whole heap more comments. They're very positive about your talk to us today and your honesty. And thanks very much, Frank, for joining us. And if people want to get more information on the conference, it's happening in May.
Happening in May, and they can, book it at SAM Conference 2013 at donegalcoco.ie.
So if they contact the council?
They contact the council or contact me or contact any of the people that I read out.
Okay.
And we're trying to hopefully get as many people as possible to come and engage on the day.
Okay, Frank McBrearty.
But the very important aspect of the conference is the afternoon session, where Jim McGuinness will give a 20-minute address, but also along with Anne-Marie Ward, Miles Sweeney, and a few other sports celebrities, will begin a conversation about what sport can do for mental health. And at the very end, then, Miles Sweeney, along with a number of sports personalities, will launch the sports charter that we have created for positive mental health.
Okay. Your openness is your strength, says a caller, Frank. And is it any wonder he sounded like an angry man? Best wishes and good luck for the future. And you're a shining light, so open and not embarrassed. You're stronger than the hard men drinking their fears away at the bar. And that's just an indication of the cause. But thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks, Shaun.
Frank McBrearty, the Mayor of the county, Councillor Frank McBrearty, speaking personally today about his own issues and his own struggle with mental health difficulties. And we'll be back after this break.